I'm Isaiah, your host with Taking Time with Token Travelers. And today with me, I have a guest I'm really excited to have on. So thank you for coming, Sebastian. Sebastian is a photographer and a journalist with a really diverse background. I don't even want to fully disclose it, but you're really well traveled. Here, you've developed photography. I believe I've heard you say that photography almost came out of necessity for you to tell stories, and that originally you were a writer, right? But can you just give us a little bit of a background on like who you are right now, and then we can dive into what got you here and some of the experiences and stories you have?
Yeah, of course. Who am I right now? That's like an existential question. Um, I guess, for the sake of uh, NFTs and the metaverse and talking about that, I'm a travel photographer who is now, trying to sell NFTs, I guess. I'm
Mm-hmm.
still a travel writer at the moment. I'm a freelancer. I work for, a lot of different media in Belgium and the Netherlands, from, newspapers, travel magazines, lifestyle magazines, basically whoever wants to pay me to go to any destination. I will probably work for them or have worked for them. And that's where I'm at right now, I guess. I've written a couple of books as well, so you could call me an author, although I hated the process, and I will probably never do that again. But yeah, basically, right now I'm a writer. I'm a travel writer and a travel photographer, and that would be the title, I guess.
So is it books specifically that you don't like authoring, or is it writing that you do not like to perform? I thought that you were writer first,
Yeah,
photographer
well,
secondary.
yeah. Well, the thing is with what are you first, the writer or the photographer? I really don't know anymore. It all started with me writing. Now I I make full stories. So if someone tells me, go to this destination and get me a story, I do the writing and I do the photography. So now it's kind of 50-50. What I'm still madly in love with the writing at times, and I am still madly in love with photography, and the two are very separate. Also in kind of uh, in time, because I mostly, the photography needs to be done, when you're uh, at a destination, right? The writing always happens afterwards. So these are two very separate things, and I love both of them. I don't love them at the same time because I don't do them at the same time, but I really enjoy, when I'm when I'm somewhere in the country, in the city, in the country, in the countryside, wherever I am, I love the photography. When I come home and I have to think about my experiences and the
Yeah.
people I met, and that's when the story kind of, I let it kind of, it's like a drip coffee or something, and it needs to come out like concentrated, and it needs to be, like good coffee, strong. And that's, that's when, I enjoy that process as well. That just takes a little bit of more time because I needed kind of to, let it simmer in. I don't know what the English term for it is, but it takes a little bit more time. Talking about the books, making a book is something that is really time consuming, and where you kind of like, uh, always trying to fight a fight where you have a vision and the editor of the book, or the
Right.
editor in chief has a different vision, and those clash. And it's, yeah, the clash is interesting, but it's exhausting as well. And I I've been through it 4 times, and I don't really, have the energy anymore for it. Also, it makes you almost no money whatsoever. So it's a horrible job. I have mad respect for people that do, that write books for a living. But it's, yeah, I don't think I will be doing that again anytime soon.
That's interesting. as you were talking, I was starting to realize though, like how essential, like our recollection, right? Our memories like reinforced when we think about something after it happens. So I'll often, go throughout my day, and maybe a week later or just a couple weeks later or a month later, say a friend or my wife will bring something up and say, "Do you remember that this happened?" And I'm like, "No." And she goes, "Well, I was thinking about that." And like I realized yada yada yada, and I can barely even remember like saying what I said or that interaction that I had. And it's because like sometimes we don't take the time to like reflect on our day or that week or whatever. And being able to write after your experience, I feel like, the photography is like keeping you in the moment. And then maybe you're even looking through photographs when you're writing, but being able to write within, after your experience just happened, once you're writing about it, I feel like you're really like cementing that into your memory. And so it's really a good way to get the most out of the travel. And so I've written about my travels. I haven't published anything. Think of it more as like a diary type ordeal, right? And I've written about some
Sure.
experiences like on boats going under the Golden Gate and going to the Farallon Islands, or going to the mountains here or there. And like those trips, I remember, or the trips that I've talked about a lot. And then the trips that I didn't give myself time to recollect, I don't remember that well. And so that's why, you'll also hear people say, I like backpacking a lot. So they're like, the most memorable trips are the ones where it all went wrong. I think that also is in part to do with like they also make for the best stories. So you're able to tell them. And when you're recounting something, it's reinforcing and cementing that in your memory. So I think writing, like, it's wise to be able to write. Do you kind of feel like, you said that it gives you an opportunity to reflect on the experiences you just had and maybe even
Hmm.
think about them differently, right? So
Yeah,
do you
sure.
ever diary as well, or is writing just like professional for you?
Yeah, I don't actually, because it's the funny thing is, I'm gonna give you an example of how I take holidays, right? And how my wife, says we're on work holiday. So I don't really have any holidays because everything is like there is no the line between a holiday and work
Right.
is, it doesn't exist anymore. It's grown. I've grown. It's grown like this where I go to a place and I always have a camera with me. I do maybe one trip or two short trips a year where I don't take a camera with me, and it feels awkward. So I always have the camera with me. And if I would get paid for the photo or for a story or not, it doesn't really matter. I need to have the photos. So it's I was going to say something, but now I kind of lost my train of thought with regards to your question.
I think,
Um,
about like, do you ever write for just yourself?
oh yeah, yeah, sure. So the writing, I sometimes when I did or lived through something crazy and I really want to remember it precisely, I'm not sure if I do that for myself or I do that because I think it's gonna be interesting for to tell a story in a later stage. I do sometimes write stuff down because as you say, things are kind of easily forgotten sometimes, and a lot of magic in travel writing is in the details. So it's in kind of the smell this. For instance, I was in the United States, and for me, everything in the United States smells differently, and it's probably because it does smell differently. But it's one of those things in my mind where I go back to my first trip that I did in the U.S. and it was a road trip, and I came to people's houses. I came in, I had a rental car, and everything to me smelled differently, and that had such a big impact on me that I still remember that. That's why I why that was so impactful. I'm not sure if that makes a lot of sense, but if you don't write that down, stuff like this, you might forget about you might forget it, because now I went back and I was, oh, that smell, that it, I never wrote that down, that I think the US smells differently. But if I would have, I could have used it in a, I could have used it in a story where I kind of reflect on, on differences, or what I think is kind of special. And this is just a stupid example of what I think is special for myself. So I didn't write that down. I maybe should have written it down at, at that time. And but I, the thing is, I don't know if I do that for, do, when I do write things down, if I do that for myself or for, a possible story. It's basically, it's turned into the same thing basically. So it's, yeah, the only difference is, for if I were to go on the real holiday, I wouldn't get paid for it. That's the only difference. So the rest, I would probably do kind of exactly the same, I think.
Yeah, I understand that. Well, gosh, you're bringing up already like how much you travel. That like going on holiday wouldn't seem that much different than work a lot of the time. But there was a time that you didn't travel much, right? Like prior to
Yeah,
shooting
yeah,
and writing.
of course, yeah. It's the thing is, I would have to go back to the moment I fell in love with traveling, right? And there is, for me, in my kind of work or travel history, I'm going to go for travel history. I can pinpoint it exactly to a date and to a place, and that was while I was in college, and there was kind of like I was studying journalism, by the way, in university, and at in my second year, I think we had like a field trip to Paris. And I live in Antwerp. Antwerp is really not that far from Paris, but I didn't grow up in a family that traveled a lot. It's we never went any further than maybe Holland, or I think I remember one time as a kid we went to Tunisia, which is northern Africa, and then one time to Canada, but that was only because my father's twin brother lives there. So that wasn't
Hmm.
really, that's a bit different. But so then I turned 18, 19, well, 19, then I was in my second year. I was probably 20 when that trip happened to Paris. And it was like a school trip, and we were in like a cheap motel in the city center of Paris, and we had to go all over Paris with the subway, the metro, and just the feeling of going there and being able to travel around in the city in the subway, and coming up above ground and seeing the Louvre or the
Yeah.
Notre Dame. It was so impactful that at that I came back from that trip and I felt heartbroken. I honestly felt like similar feeling to someone who is heartbroken, and I knew at that time, like, this is something that is so, you know it's so spectacular, and I kind of need that feeling again. And I decided to, that year, I decided to go backpacking for the first time. I was like 20, the summer after, and I made a new friend who also wanted to backpack with me, and we went through Italy, and we took a month out to travel through Italy. And that, those two moments, Paris and then the month in Italy, after that I knew, like, I'm hooked. I was addicted. I felt it immediately. It was a rush. It was beautiful. It was everything I ever dreamed of. And it was, it was, yeah, it was so special that at that time I was like, I need to get this feeling. I need to not let go of this feeling
Hmm.
anymore. It's obviously what happens then is you don't have money. I went to study in Spain for a while just to get that feeling again, and that was a couple of months. But coming back and then kind of being forced to work because I had no more money whatsoever, you're kind of forced to work and go into that professional life. And um, yeah, that's when it kind of hits you that professional life isn't, when you're starting, isn't really all that great sometimes. I remember I was working at a Foot Locker for 10 months because I couldn't find a job in journalism. Obviously, it's not easy to get a job in journalism. There is not so many jobs. Also, they're not so well paid. But yeah, I had to kind of work at Foot Locker for 10 months, and in the meantime, I was kind of doing journalism to save up to go traveling. So I did. I think I did like maybe 2 or 3 travels back then. And that was really basically before I went into journalism full time. What when I started full time, this was in 2007, I think. I kind of worked my way up in a newspaper, and I I think I kind of got rewarded for the work that I did. I wrote a lot because I was a freelancer. I worked a lot, and I got rewarded with press trips, basically. So they
Mm-hmm.
said, once a while they said, okay, Sebastian, you can go to, we have a press trip, just in. If you want to go, you can go to wherever wherever the press trip was. And I never said no. I was like, free travel. I was like, wow, it does exist, free travel.
Did you kind of
And
know
then,
that going in? So, like, did you end up
uh,
picking that freelance work? Like, was that forethought? Like, I know that I can work myself into a place where I'm traveling, or was that like just a survival move for you to make money, maybe save up to go travel? Did you realize ahead of time that, like,
no, I think everyone back then was kind of survival mode. I was just,
mm-hmm,
trying to find trying to do my job, trying to make money in journalism, which was really, really difficult in the beginning. And there was there was no plan that I made back then to turn out, how I did right now.
that's
That was
interesting.
not the that was not really the plan. But if I look back at it, maybe there was like an intention, and there obviously there was always the dream, but I'm not for me, like, real pragmatically, I don't think I chased that dream per se. I just wanted to get better, and to make money. And it's kind of, maybe because my interests were in travel, it's where I kind of, you know push myself, without, really realizing. And at one point I woke up and I was like, okay, fuck, I'm a travel journalist and a photographer right now. This is kind of odd. I did different kind of journalism, before that. So it's, but I always, make the combination. I did like 3 trips a year, then I did 4, then I did 6, then, it just grew. And everything in my career so far has just kind of, it's grown like organically. And I didn't say to myself, okay, Sebastian, at this point you need to be a travel journalist and a travel photographer, because you just can't. There is no one is going to offer you a job like this. I
That's
kind of had to
interesting. I was going to
create it.
ask, I was going to
Yeah,
ask, like, I think a lot of people, I think, my background's really similar to yours in that I didn't have a 5-year plan, and like things kind of developed, and I would like reinforce habits that resulted in things that I liked. So, now I'm able to work from home, support my family. I'm able to like podcast with you, things like that. But, even a year ago, I didn't know what life would look like, but I still just like worked really hard. And then as I see doors opening and I'm like choosing what to like reinforce, that's like where I go. But I think a lot of people are a little bit more intentional than that. And if you had a kid right now that said, Dad, say they're 14, 15 years old, they go, hey, I want to become a travel photographer just like you. Would you have like any kind of like concrete way to help that happen? Like any sort of advice for somebody that wants to do that? Like if I want to become a travel photographer, like of course I need to develop my skills, right? I understand that, but like
sure, sure.
what path, like what's the first, second, third step maybe? I know that's really specific, but if you could kind of give like even
Yeah,
a generalized answer for somebody that would ask.
yeah. The difficult thing for me to answer that question is I did not at some point in my career go like I I'm gonna be a travel photographer right now. It's I've grown into it, and I didn't really have to kind of promote myself as a photographer with, for instance, National Geographic or with other magazines. I had to, I worked the other way around where I started writing, and I needed to convince those magazines to let me write on different subjects in travel and different destinations, and then maybe a little bit later add photography to the whole, to the package. So if you're asking for, if I can give anyone advice, it's just as stupid as, look at a National Geographic, for instance, at the Traveler, and look at who's making, who's the editor in chief, and just show your work. That's kind of how it's
Mm-hmm.
always been, I guess. That's how I got in, but by just showing what I did and having like a few propositions for them. Is that a word? Propositions,
Yeah,
proposals,
absolutely. No, proposition. Perfect. Yeah.
propositions for them.
Like kind of like a
Um,
value. This is, say, it sounds like you're saying, I'm really interested in, maybe they would say no, because maybe it's done a lot, but I'm really interested in the catacombs and a lot of the history there. I'm going on a trip. Perhaps I can like submit a piece to National Geographic. Is that what you mean? You know?
yeah, more or less. Yeah, it's the thing is, I I think it kind of works if you have like a nice catalog with your work and you show
Mm-hmm.
someone, and maybe at that point they're looking for someone who does like a special type of photography on, let's say, volcanoes,
Mm.
just to name a thing. And you could like sell the idea of going to Ecuador, or like be more specific. If I were to go to National Geographic and they don't know me, and I go like, okay, here's like five of my pictures that I took in Paris, London, and New York, it's going to be difficult. And also, if everyone says they love traveling, and everyone
Right.
loves to travel,
Yeah.
but it's, you need to show kind of your skill. And the problem is how do you get the skill? It's, if you haven't traveled that much, if you don't know the magazines really well. Also, what is interesting to discuss is there is a genre that is travel photography, and that's, most people don't really realize, because it's kind of a weird genre, but there is a difference between a landscape photographer and and a travel photographer, or a food photographer and travel, or
I would think like a travel photography genre may actually be more in line with like a lifestyle photographer more so than like a landscape photographer, right? Would you
yeah, well,
could you
maybe, yeah,
define the
that
travel
could be true.
genre a little bit?
Well, the funny thing is, what I said before in Twitter Spaces, when people asked me, or when I went into travel photography spaces, and I heard people talk
Mm,
of what they did and what they thought was travel photography, I was like, oh, but this is, you're kind of mistaken. It's not because you do, you chase hurricanes or something, that you're a travel doing travel photography. It's not because you kind of traveled to a destination for a specific purpose that you're doing travel photography. For me, and that maybe some people have different definitions of travel photography. For me, it's kind of the group of genres that you have to master as a travel photographer. So you kind of do street and landscape and portraiture and documentary, and you kind of have to be like decent at all of those, which also makes it more difficult to be like really proficient in one of those. It's you're gonna go for the whole package, I think. Um, and and then I started thinking of, is there a difference between just like maybe a lifestyle picture and travel photography? And the funny thing is, I'm going to give an example of National Geographic. And when I went to Uzbekistan a couple of years back, I didn't know I wasn't sent there for National Geographic. I came back with a crazy story, and I sold it to National Geographic. So my photography wasn't really specifically made for National Geographic, but they told me, the photo editor sent me an email, and she said, "Do you have pictures that aren't so pretty, that aren't so like maybe, I wouldn't say commercial, but like maybe like
More
too pretty?"
relatable, maybe.
Yeah, well, more relatable, like more gritty, like more real. I would say real. And there is like, what I find in, that gets published often is kind of like a realness in pictures. It doesn't have to look. You don't have to Photoshop people out of Times Square. It's not the Instagram look that people are going for, where there is only one person on a rock somewhere hanging over a canyon or something, like your typical Instagram photo. That's not actually what gets sold that easily. But it's more like more real situations, I would say. And it's kind of difficult to pinpoint, because even for me, having done this for many years now, I sent the magazines and newspapers I work for, I send them a bunch of photos, right? Let's say 50, and they're going to publish on a six page story, they're going to publish maybe 10 or
9. Yeah.
12. Yeah, maybe 9. It depends on how big they're going to put them. Maybe less even. And I'm always surprised about their photo selection. So it's I just got the story back um, from Idaho. I was in Idaho. I sold them the story. I send them my pictures, and they give me the PDF, and I'm like, wow, what I did not expect to see this, right? And sometimes it's good. Sometimes you go like, these motherfuckers. Sorry, pardon my French. These assholes.
MFers.
They didn't understand. They don't understand that this that's not important in the story, and they shouldn't have. And it's kind of
It
it's
wasn't
not
the
the
story you
I
were trying to tell. It's so interesting. Like you, it wasn't the story you were trying to tell. And sometimes you're probably right, because maybe you talk to more people, but then they're also trying to use like metrics on their demographics, and like they
exactly.
know like what their readers want, and
Yeah,
it's just super interesting. Maybe you can do like your own like edition or something, and kind of just, maybe if it
yeah,
was
but that
free.
would that would be awesome. And that's the funny thing is, I did start a long time ago with a travel blog, and I could just do whatever I wanted. Now I don't have I don't really have the option to kind of fight a photo editor, or I could, but I won't. I'm just gonna assume they're at their place. They do what they do because
Hmm.
they know what they do, right?
Hmm.
That makes my life easier. Just assuming that everyone is on in their seats because they deserved it and they're good. So I'm always thinking there is probably a reason why they chose this picture and not the other one, and it's not for me to decide. They're just paying me to give them like 50 pictures and to give them a text, and whatever happens to it, it's that's up to them, really. Obviously, sometimes it is like you go like, that's that's a shame,
Yeah, it's a
but
shame,
still,
right? Yeah,
it's
exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
I think I know what
but
you
I'm not.
mean.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna complain. I'm not gonna complain too much, because I mean, that's they pay me, and they can do whatever they want, and they see fit to make a different selection. That's really up to them. It is what it is.
Yeah, right on. Talking about travel photography. I think talking with you, I've talked with you enough to understand like that there's a lot to talk about. So I don't really have like a general direction that, or I didn't have like a general direction that this would go. But now I'm just kind of interested. When you brought up Italy, backpacking Italy, you brought up that trip to Paris. It one, I haven't even made my way to Europe yet. I would love to, just from like a architectural, historical, anthropological standpoint. Like, they're very, I love like the Western Hemisphere. Like, the things that I explore are really, really neat. I still haven't even made my way to like pyramids in Mexico or to Patagonia, things of that nature. Like, can't wait to do that. But, I think like so much of our culture, so many inventions are inspired by Europe and Asia, and like, I guess I would say like those countries that like civilized really early compared to here, um, on like a mass scale, right? Like aqueducts, and like essentially it follows irrigation. So like any geographic location that like had really early irrigation from like Egypt, Rome, things like that. I'd really be interested in seeing that. So you brought up how like those trips sparked your interest in like a really profound way. And I was wondering, is that more of what you're interested in as opposed to like me? I go to the Sierras a lot, right? Like in California, I'm backpacking up there. I'm going to some like natural lakes, some lakes that like a utility company put in almost 100 years ago. It's really interesting history. But has your sense of like what you want when you travel changed, or is it like you're open to anything? Like, what are you geared towards?
Yeah, so I think I'm pretty much open to anything. It's you know, I do a lot of Europe, that because I work for a women's magazine, and the women are, it's like 35 plus, that's what they say, but it's mostly like 50 plus. So it's not very adventurous mostly. Although I don't want to say that 50 plus women can have like the most awesome adventures, but this particular one is more on, it's a bit different, and they expect for me to go to uh, maybe uh, the north of Spain, or like a French to the French Riviera, or to Germany, or I'm going to Luxembourg, one of the smallest countries in Europe. I'm going there yeah, this Friday. So it's those are different travels than when National Geographic sends me to Uzbekistan, or I do New Caledonia and spend 22 hours in an airplane before I get there, or there is a I have to kind of do all of them, and
Mm-hmm.
I still appreciate like all of them. If I have to go for the things that I really like personally, I love spending time in the wilds. It's because maybe, growing up in Belgium or in the Western Europe, you're kind of surrounded by beautiful old places. And it's, yeah, we don't have a lot of wilderness. We don't have a lot of forests. It's, and I think if I, if I want to go somewhere a place that inspires me, I'm looking for the things that I don't have, right here. I only have to travel like in basically an hour to get to Amsterdam. I was in London last weekend. It's like a 2 hour train ride. Paris takes me an hour and 20 minutes, I would say. I live a 40
Wow.
minute drive from the city of Bruges, which is, it's one of the most pretty cities in Europe. It's beautiful. So if you ask me, what do you want, and I want to be I want to be in a cabin in Iceland with no neighbors within a radius of like 100 kilometers, and I want it to snow, or you know I want to be in the jungle in Costa Rica, or
Oh yeah, gosh.
yeah. So
Definitely
I'm
speaking
gonna
my
be like,
language. Yeah.
yeah, I had like a meeting with someone from Canada just now, like a couple of hours ago, because I sold two stories on Canada to National Geographic travelers. So they're sending me there and to do one story on Vancouver, and then one is Vancouver Island with an RV, going to the like when the salmon go back upstream, and then there are
Spawning. Yeah.
bears. Yeah, and then you get there is whales on a certain island, and go back to the mainland with a ferry, and then just spend like 4 or 5 days just in the woods in a cabin. That's my idea of of a nice trip, and that's my idea of adventure, and yeah, something that immediately inspires, right? I the cities, they're cool. I love, I like cities, but if you're asking me for my favorites, like everyone is like New York City is the best place on earth, right, in terms of cities. But I've been a couple of times. It is epic. Do I want to spend more than a couple of days there? No, I get exhausted. There is too much noise, and there's too many people. So I rather go to into the countryside, and see some nature that we don't have. Like go see some waterfalls or do some hikes, and I was in Idaho and Montana and Wyoming recently, a month ago, and everything is exciting because I don't know what bear spray is. I don't know how to use it like this or like this. So
Oh my
everything
gosh,
is
let me tell you a story about bear spray. So, just a couple years ago, there was this woman, I think, going into Yellowstone or something, and you see signs, bring your bear spray, or you'll see it on pamphlets when you go into a national forest or national park in the
sure.
U.S. And there's bear lockers and how to use bear canisters, all these different things, and it's just as much about the safety of the bear because you want to discourage interaction. So it's important to like keep your food in like bears, like in these recommended places, because it's not just about like making sure, it's almost as much about like not tempting the bear as it is like putting it in a place that like they can't get into. So like, a proper bear canister, like they shouldn't be able to smell, and they still can because they're from the Canidae family, I believe. They have really strong sense of smell, but um, you want to discourage interaction, because if that bear interacts with humans, like one, it's a dangerous situation for the people, and it can become comfortable doing that, so you're endangering like people in the future because you didn't want to put your food in a certain spot, and then that bear can you know often relocated but also often killed because it's like going into people's trash cans, and there's too many close calls, right? Because they're really dangerous.
Exactly. Yeah.
So the bear spray, you don't. Basically, this woman was like going into Yellowstone or something, and so you know how you use like mosquito repellent.
I should
So
put it on herself.
no, she sprayed her kids with it. And so
Oh
then they
God.
went they went to the
Yeah.
hospital. It's basically just, a strong pepper spray. I'm sure everybody was okay, but like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
never would have considered that, and it's because not everybody has that same context. Not everybody's grown up around bears or had those experiences. So I don't mean to like make fun of them, but at the same time, it just goes to show like how people perceive things so much differently, right? Like, oh, it's bear spray.
Exactly.
It must be a repellent. And so
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
sprays
Yeah.
her kids. Man,
That's
that's
interesting.
crazy. So,
Yeah.
I enjoy going to cities as well. I need to go to the Louvre and spend like a week there, and I'll probably just do that once. I need to see some of that really cool stuff. But I think maybe one of the reasons why, well, I grew up going outside a lot in the mountains. I love being around water. I think like rivers, specifically
Yeah.
rivers, even though a lot of people
Exactly.
like to recreate in lakes, like I just love rivers and like exploring them and following them, and oftentimes, like more often than people think, we're like walking by bones and like fossils and petrified wood and like these really cool things. And in riverbeds you can find arrowheads and and all this stuff. And um, the I think the reason why I prefer that, it's either because like I was kind of like groomed that way when I was young. I think also the reason why people romanticize that so much is because, like, for the most of the human population already lives in cities, so that shapes that. But also, like, most of our production, right? Most of our documentaries, most of our um, I know, contrary to like David Attenborough, who, like, I don't know has ever made a city documentary, but you know all these movies, right? New York, Washington D.C., Berlin, like London, and so I feel like maybe we already have a lot of exposure to those things. So I'm like very prone to like the wild too. And if you like being in the wild, have you ever been in like a pretty precarious situation? Like, maybe not near
Yeah.
death, but if you have a near death experience, I'd like to, and it has to do with traveling, I'd like to hear about it.
Y- Yeah, it's kind of hard to say if it was really
It was just
dangerous.
dangerous.
The idea was pretty stupid. So I had like I was doing the northeast of Spain at some point, like a couple of years back. I was traveling by myself, and I think I had like 8 days, and one of the days on my itinerary there was a mountain called Pedraforca, and it's kind of a famous mountain there in the northeast. And I'm not sure if it was on the itinerary that I would climb it to the top and then back, but I felt like I was there anyway, so I was like, let's do it. And I looked it up, and it said someone commented uh, somewhere on the internet and went like, okay, it's like a 4 hour hike and it is quite doable, or whatever. I don't know. I read 4 hours. I was like, okay, I can manage 4 hours. So I started. Obviously, I went in the wrong direction, which was way harder, and I only brought like one bottle of water, like uh, maybe half a liter of water, and no food. I thought, I'm just gonna have breakfast, and I'm gonna do the walk for 4 hours, the hike, and then I'm gonna find a place to have lunch. Turned out after 2 hours of climbing, and it was pretty rough climbing as well. I was famished and I was thirsty. Oh my, the water was finished. I had no food. I was hungry. So I stopped and I was like, it's 2 hours. How much farther can it be? Um, so after like a little small pause, sorry, I'm kind of sweating here. You caught me on the warmest day of the year almost, and I'm actually wearing the shirt just for you, and I don't have any pants on. So it's, the situation right now. So I kept walking because I thought, how far can it be? And I was going kind of around to go, to the top of the mountain. Um, and all of it, at some point I had to climb with ropes, and I really had to pull myself up. And I was already so exhausted that I just couldn't go on anymore. But I came to this point where it was equally dangerous to go back down as it was to keep going
Hmm.
and then take another route down. So I stopped because my muscles weren't functioning anymore in my legs. My upper legs were like,
Dehydration, maybe,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah,
exertion, right?
exactly. So I had to, there were people, luckily there were people doing the same thing as I was, and way smarter people that actually brought enough food and drink. So they helped me out, and there was, two Spanish families that actually fed me, and gave me like jerky or something or whatever, gave me water, and eventually, I only made it through. It was getting pretty cold. This was, beginning of November. It was obviously the higher I got, the colder it got. Also, the more I was sweating. So I was also not very well dressed for the occasion, and I was there. My legs were shaking, and I was like, there were ravines, and it was just like a very dangerous situation where I was kind of like, what should I do? Every road that I take from now on is possibly the last one I take, because it is very, the pathway is very narrow. My legs don't feel like I can trust them anymore, like
And
the
you
knees
don't even
and
trust your own judgment at this point.
yeah,
So
yeah,
like
exactly.
you're,
Yeah.
when in these situations, it's like you're always second guess like that decision. Like maybe you've made a decision, but you're always second guessing it at this point because you're not
Exactly.
like super
Yeah.
rational.
Yeah. It's like a mental fight as well, obviously. But in the end, it took me like 7 hours instead of the four. And the four actually, I turned out he was describing a different one, like a different mountain altogether. I was like, damn, I didn't, my Spanish isn't not really the best. I thought I had read that like it was, the information I had was correct, but it was, it was just me. Other than that, like in natural situation, like in nature, I haven't really come across anything dangerous because it's more the humans that are dangerous, right? So it's, do you ever get like, you know, obviously you can run into a bear and you can run into a mountain lion, but chances are pretty low, I would say, in most parts of the world. Um, and if you know how to behave, I guess that will save your life or that will help you. With humans, it's a different story. You don't really know how they will behave, and yeah, you can't just use bear spray on humans. It would be kind of dangerous, I guess, or you will get
I think
arrested.
it
And
it could
that
work, you know,
it
if
could, yeah,
you.
it definitely works. But yeah, I had to run from my life one time where, yeah, where we got chased by maybe some people, maybe some drug dealing types of people
Mhm.
uh, that had that were maybe saying that they were going to fuck us up. I'm not sure what that means, and what to what extent you'll
Was
be
that in the
fucked up in the end.
U.S.?
That wasn't definitely in the U.S. Yes, that was in
Uh,
Santa Cruz, in
oh,
California. Yeah, yeah,
huh.
and but it's other than that, really, it's been quite alright. It's think if there is always like some luck involved, I guess. Also, maybe some like trusting yourself and your instincts and go like, okay, this doesn't feel like a good neighborhood to
Yeah.
to kind of rest up and ask people for directions or something. Um, but mostly people, mostly in most places, people are actually really nice and they're kind of helpful. And I know there is a lot of fear, and I know there is, for instance, if I were to talk about countries like Uzbekistan in the US, right? People would really maybe not even believe me that I went there, but it's really like a very
There's a few
normal.
things I'd like to do in a couple of those countries, and some of them are really exclusive. There's an island outside in the Middle East somewhere, and you have to like really get permitted ahead of time to go. Only like one guide is able to take you there, and there's like these really unique trees. I can't remember the name of it, but
Yeah,
you're right. Anything
I
you
I know
say,
which one. Yeah,
like anything Kistan, right, is or Istan is
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like stigmatized for sure. So I'm,
It is. Yeah.
and you've brought it up a few times. It was obviously like something you really enjoyed. So
Very much so, yeah. And that the thing is, I think a lot of people and a lot of travelers are maybe afraid for something unknown. And the beauty of travel is, you take away the fear and you get to know people, and people will
yeah,
see people from the US, wherever they travel to those countries, they will see that those people that live there are also human beings that want to, just want are, could, are friendly mostly, just want to, want to have a job and support their family, and are just like similar people. They just live in a different situation, right?
one of my
And that's,
friends is like
I,
fairly well traveled,
yeah,
and he was like, people are basically the same everywhere. Like, sorry to disappoint.
yeah,
And he was
yeah.
like, honestly, like people have like the same mannerisms, the same humor, like the same things that they do like day to day. And but you're talking about it, I think, in a better light, that like it's a good reminder, that we're all people.
Yeah,
Whereas he seemed more
yeah.
disappointed.
Well, the funny thing is, I'm gonna like mention a situation I had in my on my last day in Idaho just recently. there was a guy sitting next to me, an old biker, who called all of the people moving from the coastal states,
Mm-hmm.
who came into Idaho to live there because it's cheaper to live there, and nice nature, and it's beautiful. So he called them commies, which is kind of it's kind of odd. It's he was afraid of those people, basically, just West Coast people, not really having enough money to keep living on the West Coast, or just preferring Idaho for the nature. He called them commies. He then, 5 minutes after he called them commies, and he made some bad comments about foreigners and foreigners taking
Was
jobs.
he
And I
talking
mean,
to you or next to you?
he was no, he was we had a conversation. So because obviously when you go into kind of a saloon, and we don't really, I was with my wife, and we don't really look that cowboy-esque, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of get into a conversation quite quickly. He made some comments on foreigners in the US, with jobs, and obviously it comes from fear, or fear of the unknown or something, even though they pretend it's kind of it's like just being tough, right? But 2 minutes after, he said these things about the West Coast people, or any foreigners coming in. He said he was going to Europe in a couple of weeks, or maybe is here right now. He was going to go on a Rhine cruise from, where does the Rhine go? From Amsterdam to, through Germany to, where does the Rhine go? To Budapest? No, it doesn't go there. Anyway, it doesn't really matter where it goes. But I found that so interesting, that he's like, fucking foreigners and fucking West Coast people. Then he goes to Europe and goes on a Rhine cruise, which is kind of, I shouldn't say this, but kind of the lamest type of tourism, like a river cruise. It's like for mostly for elderly people that want to see a couple of, like, old arty cities. I mean, they're beautiful cities, and it's well worth going to those cities. But it's interesting how one's mind works. And then you would hope, actually, that someone comes to Europe, or someone goes to any other place and comes back with a more of an open mind. Because if he does a Rhine cruise in Europe, he's probably been maybe a couple of times, or he's been here. He was a Vietnam veteran. That might explain what some stuff he said about some people in different countries. But you would hope that travel kind of opens your heart and opens your eyes, and makes that fear that someone like this has kind of go away, because he sees, like,
Well, he
everyone is
may
okay.
be well traveled. I mean, for one, yeah, he was obviously traveling decades ago as a veteran, but the
Sure.
United States is like so vast that he might like go to Canada on his motorcycle and then come back down through the panhandle of Idaho and go to Nevada and then go to Arizona. And he's like spanning, 1,500, 1,600 miles and seeing all these
Yes.
different places. But like, you can actually do like that whole trip and not really come into like a meaningful city or see anybody that like dresses differently, honestly, except warmer and colder. Or, I mean, I guess like what I'm trying to say is like the United States is so vast that you can go a long ways without even like bumping into a different place, because all these places, they're colder and hotter, and that's about it. But you might not even run into people. I guess that's what I'm getting at. It's like the United States is just so vast, and so is Canada. All of North America, really. Like Mexico is
Yeah.
huge, and
But that's the beauty of it as well. I spent countless hours on the on the in a car in the US, doing a road trip on the roads. Sometimes go for hours without seeing a car, and just that fact alone, to me, is like worth remembering, because that never happens in Europe. That's
mm-hmm.
just, and those are the types of situations that every traveler is looking for. Just something that is different from from where you
I'm
are
almost
during
used to that, and it's still uncanny. You start to
yeah.
get a little bit like it doesn't feel right, or like no one's there to help. something happens, and
Yeah.
sure, somebody might drive by, like, but it's just, or like, I've also seen movies, right? And I'm like, well, this is, it's just, I'm alone.
Yeah.
And it just gets a
Yeah.
little bit unnerving. I've done like 8-hour stretches of like nothing. And
Yeah.
well, so with that, you brought up Arco, and I'm glad you did. And I know it's hot over there, but maybe we can kind of go over the trip, and I can show viewers a few of the photographs that you have. And just to give people some context, obviously Sebastian has done so much before even thinking about NFTs, right? And this isn't necessarily about NFTs, but there's a photography project that happens to be on the blockchain, right? And you use crypto to buy it. And so I'm going to be bringing that up, and then you can just explain the work and maybe go over a few of the pictures, and you and I can like kind of try to paint the picture for the listeners too, because a lot of people will only be consuming this media via like a podcast, and I just want to make sure they get like a pretty good idea of it as well.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, I will share here so that you can see as well. Are you able to see your collection?
I am, yes.
Okay, so this is the abroad collection. Oh, these are mine. Let's see. How would I sort to just you, to your? Here we go.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Okay, which one is the one that our friend Alex collected? Brovo on Twitter. This one, right?
That's the one. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
He really had an eye for that because that got published. Is that right?
No, no, nothing has been published yet. I mean, I just went there, and normally, it takes a while before things get published. But I
Mm-hmm.
did receive the PDF from National Geographic, and they put in two of those pictures of Arco, Idaho. And I have to mention to people watching this or hearing this, Arco is a very, very small. Well, they call it a city. I would say it's a town. It's a city, and the special thing about the city, besides the fact that it's like it is somewhat picturesque, not in a beautiful way, but like more of an eerie, interesting way, is the fact that this was the first city in the world to be lit by atomic power, and that was the year 1955, I believe.
Is it still
From
powered through like
Oh,
nuclear power?
there was still a nearby power plant. So I'm just going to assume that they're still powered by electricity from that plant. But yeah, this was on our last day in Idaho, and we drove through, and we were hungry, so we were like looking around, and it felt like a ghost town. And if you're from Europe and you go through ghost towns, it kind of has an effect on you. You're like, oh, this is actually pretty epic. It's so cool. Nothing is going on here, and there is these old buildings, and everything is kind of derelict, and some things are kind of nice again, or they kind of refurbish them, or like the motel sign is like pretty iconic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, here there is the Arco. I'm gonna assume that was what was that again? The Arco well, it was like the local newspaper here. Gonna have to look that up. But Arco. Anyway, so we were driving around, and I said to my wife, like, these are some cool places to actually like make photos of and turn them into NFTs. You kind of have that look that where you don't even need a film camera, and they still look like film, right? It's
Yeah, because
like
everything's kind of, I don't want to say film looks faded, but
yeah,
the paint
yeah,
is all faded,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and it
exactly,
was
exactly.
arid. It was arid, so it kind of, yeah, you described that perfectly.
Yeah, yeah. So we actually first we were driving around, taking a couple of pictures already. Then we were hungry, so the only thing we could eat there was, I think that there was one of the pictures is a green building, and that's the burger joint, and the burger joint is called the atomic, no, pickle, something with pickle.
Pickles
It's
Place.
kind of Pickle's place, and it's kind of famous because it is on the road to somewhere, to a place that is more interesting.
Craters of the Moon.
And people, yeah, Craters of the Moon, and people stop there to get their, lunch or dinner or whatever. And Pickle's place is actually famous for that atomic burger. And I just had to order the burger, and it's kind of odd because people in there are very different. You go in and people look at you and go like, "You're a foreigner. You're a foreigner." And obviously we're foreigners, but people in there wear like wife beaters and cowboy hats. And wife beater, is that the thing? You know what I mean? Like
The white tank tops.
tank top. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And like it's greasy. And
So
the
just
chef
to
is in the
clarify, he
kitchen.
didn't say everyone in Arco, Idaho is a wife beater. They're wearing
No,
the
no,
white
I
tank tops that
meant
we call wife beaters.
yes.
Sorry.
Exactly. I think white beater is actually British, like an English term. But anyway, so just to like paint a picture, right? And everything is like greasy, and you know the girl who is waiting the tables, she. I mean, everyone looks a bit like small town, local
Or
community who's
older
never
than they
been.
should look. Did you get that feeling?
Well,
I get that feeling in places like this that like people aren't
yeah,
as old as they look, you know?
yeah,
But
maybe
I
that's the
also
case.
enjoy a lot of people in places like this, like just like how
Me too.
down to earth they are, and like I know that
Exactly.
there's negative experiences to be had anywhere, but I also like just some of the people I meet are like some of the nicest. Like I'm just like, wow, I kind of wish my mom was kind of like this kind of thing, like just like really sweet, really
Yeah,
hospitable.
they are.
But
They
I
are.
also,
Yeah, yeah.
they may not see me as a foreigner right away, so I'm not sure
Yeah,
how
yeah,
that
exactly.
changes
Yeah.
things either.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure either because I'm always a foreigner in your country, so that's different. It
Hmm.
doesn't matter really because the point of the thing is that burger was delicious. So if anyone is in the vicinity of Arco, Idaho, you should really go and have that atomic burger. But
Is
after
it
that, we decided
spicy?
to kind of. I don't think it was. It was kind of more radiant, but it was,
It was radioactive.
it was radioactive. Yeah, it was beautiful. But yeah, after that we decided, we should drive around again and see across the street from from Pickle's place was actually the motel, which was the most colorful motel I had seen, and that's the one actually being published in big in National Geographic over 2 pages.
Oh,
I
see,
made a
you just
square
gave
of
me
it
some
here.
alpha, and I'd feel bad because I won't publish this for a little while, so I won't act
Yes,
on it.
yes,
But I
you
was
know
trying to
already.
guess which one it was. Oh man,
Yeah,
now I can't grab it. Oh geez, it'd just be so wrong.
it would be wrong because you get like insider trading
Yeah,
advice, but
exactly.
yeah, but still, it would be like I would do the same probably. But I do get to the PDF of the story. It's like the opening page of the story. It's like over 2 pages, like the spread. It looks beautiful with these colors, and yeah, I'm not sure if it's very typical Idaho because to me Idaho was more about like the canyons and the rivers and the forests and the
Well, you're in
bears
like
instead of.
southeastern Idaho for
Yeah,
this,
exactly,
right? And a
exactly.
lot of like
Yeah,
southern Idaho looks like Nevada and Utah. So
yeah,
I would
exactly.
say like this is a big part of it. This is maybe 25 to 30% of Idaho is like this before you get into like these really green, lush places with
Yeah,
lots of water. This is super cool picture, by the way. It definitely like looks super vintage. And then like
yeah,
you've got, so each door is a room, right? So each color is two rooms,
yeah,
and then they
exactly.
have like the window ACs. Like each one has like one of those window ACs, and the motel's like bright green, bright blue, bright red, and then bright orange. It's actually really pretty. It's a very pretty motel, and like it's
It
got
is,
charm, real charm.
and there is more colors to it as well. I think it's. I cropped it to be a square because that fit well with the other ones, but this one would actually have worked pretty well with the motel sign on it. And I think they
Mm.
had like two more rooms, which would have been yellow then, and another color maybe to the left of it. I'm not sure, but yeah, it was a very interesting place in a you know in a city or in a town that was really white and beige and maybe a little bit light grayish of colors,
Right.
like with the
Really
rocks and
neutral
like
colors. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That really stood out. So I thought that was pretty cool. And then, yeah, I mean, it's just like a couple of blocks, a town like this. It's not so many streets, but you drive around and you feel like, ooh, you know, how did people used to live here? Why did people used to live here? And what is still going on here right now? It raises so many questions. And as the writer in me goes, in search of those stories, I think, and I just, my my brain starts functioning, and I just make up the stories in my head, like how life is in a place like this, right? It's because it's so different from what we experience here. And if you're, especially if you grow up in the city or something, it's just so different. But there is also, there is like maybe there is a lack of elegance in places like this, but there is so much enthusiasm. No, not enthusiasm. That's the wrong word. There is so much charm to it. There, and you see it in a building like this, right? This is the city hall, or how do you call this? Is city hall? Is that a
Yeah.
word?
Yeah. I was
Yeah,
thinking it
city
was a
hall.
post office, but that makes sense.
Yeah,
It's kind of
and it's
like a
just yeah.
cobblestone siding with like a really like it's definitely just all masonry and it looks like natural cobblestone, like all put together, made up the entire building. It's actually pretty neat if you think about it to get like the round. I just
It
get blown away
is,
by old craftsmanship and
but
like
it's also ugly. It's equally ugly as it is beautiful, and it's interesting. It's you wouldn't build this to be your home, right? But it's one of
I think
those
like an
buildings where
eccentric billionaire
yeah,
might,
yeah,
you
maybe,
know.
maybe that's true. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
But
Yeah,
you've
but the
also
funny thing
done
is,
like tiny home esque like one of your books, right? It's like was it Odd Homes or Most Beautiful Places to Live or
no, yeah, I've done like the you know the I have a trilogy and then a separate one, and the separate one is everything that has to do with water, everything on the ocean, in the ocean, next to the ocean, next to big bodies of water. But the first three are actually books on like architecturally interesting places to stay if you're
that's
traveling.
right. Right.
Yeah, they're mostly like ridiculously expensive, but it's yeah, places like these where you have like the most beautiful views, um, and yeah, it's I would say don't bother buying. I'm not even sure if they're still sold. I think one of maybe the last one is still sold, but I don't think the other ones are still in circulation. So I mean
Well, there's
they're
shows
bullshit
like this now
they're
too, so
bullshit books, man. Yeah, I mean so, this is not my idea of I didn't, I didn't invent the idea to make a book about this. People ask me because they know I'm a writer and photographer. They asked me to do these books, and I said yes. And did I regret it ever since? Uh, a little bit. No, no, not really. But it's not the
you're
the
just
most
not looking
interesting
forward
work
to
I've
it
done.
again. Yeah.
No, no, definitely. Jeez, man, it's like 110 degrees or something here today. I don't have air conditioning.
That's okay. I was getting ready to wrap it up. I'm really glad, man. I've been trying to talk with you for a few weeks. Took me a while to get my act together. I do talk to you on a semi-regular basis.
Yeah,
You
sure,
know,
sure.
but I really appreciated like kind of getting the backstory. You also already talked about one of my closing questions, or really the closing question, which is like, what makes travel so special? I think your answer was basically that you start to realize, like, break down these barriers to humanity. So since you kind of already went there, maybe I can just ask, where are you looking forward to going next and why?
But I just wanted to say on that previous
Okay.
question of yours, what is important to, you know, it's not that important for other people to understand, but it's important for me to understand my reasons for, for travel, and why travel is so important to me is because I can feel deep down that I'm a scared old man, in a very young body, obviously, as you can see. But I, I've always kind of known that if I don't watch out, I will become a bitter old scared man, like like the one I talked about, in the
Yeah.
bar, and that's like my biggest fear, right? So the reason why I love, why I don't only love what I do, but also it is needed and it's so important for my development, is because it gives me that openness, and it makes me fall in love with the world again, and makes my fears go away, and makes everything, yeah, more, gives me more room to breathe and be open to the world. And this is so important because if you're not careful and you don't do this, you get a very one-sided view of the world, where I know people kind of digest, like any news right now from their one medium that they have, whether it's Facebook or Twitter. And the problem is that if you're kind of in this, you're kind of caught in this medium that only will provide you the things you know you the things that already fit in your in your train of thought, if you will. So it's it is very dangerous nowadays, I feel, to kind of get scared of the world, because it is basically like, if you just go by the news, right, it's a freaking scary place, man. It's I mean we're um, there's countries that have war that are.
Uh-oh. We might have lost him. Okay, so you can see Sebastian's froze. What I'm going to do is I'll probably clip the next minute or so, and I'll try to get him back on so that we can say bye to everybody. But I'm worried that maybe his laptop died or something like that. Okay, so we got Sebastian back. Power went out on
All
your
right.
street, so your light's off in your background now, but you're on the phone so that we can finish these closing thoughts. And you were on fire. You were absolutely on fire talking about how scared
I
you are.
was. I hope you can hear me, because now I'm on
Yeah,
4G and I'm not sure about the quality.
you sound great.
Yeah, that's quite strange, but yeah, I'm not sure what's going on in the street. Maybe it is too hot. I have no clue. Anyway, I was wrapping up by saying, I needed the travel to, for just for me to stay open to the world and not be scared of it. And that's, for me, that is the bottom line. That's why I do what I do in the end. And yeah, I love that I made this my job, and I get to do this. It's quite incredible. You had a different question, I think, of where
Oh,
I
yeah,
was
where
going to
would
go
you
next, or
maybe where are you going next, or where would you like to go soon?
I'm going in 2 days from now. I'm going to Luxembourg, which is a very, very small country, but it's attached to Belgium. So this is one of the trips I can do on the in the car, which is interesting. Then I don't have to fly, which is that's nice. And it's a small country with a lot of nature, and should be interesting. After that, I think I have like the south of France in a couple of weeks. Then I'm going to Canada for that trip for National Geographic. Then I do have like the one of the Canary Islands, like Spanish Canary Islands, and I've got
Gosh,
Paris
that's
and
like a
Budapest,
lifetime.
and
That's a lifetime of trips in the next couple months.
yeah, it's gonna be busy. It's my season starts again like for real in beginning of September or end of August, and then it lasts until November. Then I'm kind of finished because the weather starts to become really bad in most places in Europe. So it doesn't make much sense to create. It gets more difficult to make beautiful pictures of cities, and so I go on a little break, and then I do the ski season, like a couple of ski stories, and then my new season starts again in I'm gonna say February, or if I can do a longer one like in Asia, like a far away one. But other mostly March till end of June mostly. So that's kind of it. But for this year, I've kind of already set the destinations. But if I had to choose which ones I would do in the next year, I've got a trip to the Azores, which is not very famous, but it's like the Hawaii of Europe, and it's kind of middle.
Is it considered that way? It's Portugal, right?
It is Portugal, yeah. But that's what they call it, Hawaii, European Hawaii. So I've never been, but it looks absolutely gorgeous. And I want to go to the actual Hawaii, which would take me it's so far for where I am, from where I am. And I want to do Alaska as well. But, those are things that are on my bucket list right now. But the bucket list, it changes, quite often. It's you meet people who've been to, other places, and you get inspired by them, and then you go like, okay, I always love to go to Africa. I love safaris. I love wildlife. I love wildlife photography. So if I can kind of squeeze in a trip to, let's say, Zambia or Zimbabwe, I would be the happiest. That I think wildlife photography is my main passion, or my love. It's so different, and those trips to Africa are so valuable. Safari trips are a bit different because you don't really get to experience like real Africa. But if you have the chance, like in Rwanda or Uganda, you can or in places like Namibia, you can do a whole tour and have have part of it be like a wildlife part, and then the other part have a true African experience in those countries. It's that's
I don't think you have a hippopotamus in your wildlife portfolio on object.
I don't know, because I do have
hippos are probably my favorite animals. So
I might have to put one up then, so you can grab it like a one of one for very cheap. But they're not really the most beautiful ones. So
that's why they're my favorite. They're literally like water cows.
Exactly. Yeah,
and they're dangerous. I think they're the most dangerous.
They're really dangerous. Yeah, and the problem is as far as photography goes, they're in the water mostly, and you only see like part of their head, and that's not really the prettiest part that they have. And if you see them walking towards you, you have to rush back to your car, and it gets dangerous. So those are not the easiest, but
there's the real challenge, and I hope you don't end up dead trying to fulfill my dreams of your photography. But I want like a good front view, mouth open.
That would be
they're
nice.
So ugly. I'm starting to get ideas. Like, I feel like I barely even scratched the surface. So maybe if you know that you have like open time on your itinerary when you're abroad sometime, let me know and we can talk again. Or if you can give like a 10-minute hot take another day, on like how you make these itineraries, because you're talking about going to Alaska, going to Hawaii, and like kind of how you research and plan out what can happen. That'd be really great for me to hear as well. As
sure, of course.
But I'll let you go, man. I know you got to deal with this power issue, and I know you're itching to take your shirt off. And
definitely. Pretty odd. I'm not gonna do that on camera, so it's I can hear my computer starting again, so it's the power is back on.
I hear that too, some beeping. Yeah,
exactly. That's my printer. All right, good, we have power. That's good.
Right on, man. Thank you so much.
It was really cool talking to you. So I hope I did well I didn't want to talk too much, too much bullshit, and actually like I really talk about travel. And there needs to be. I know, and when we've talked, before, there's always something, that I'm always a bit, I do laugh with a lot of stuff, but when it really goes, when we talk travel, it is so, it's something that's also very serious and, and dear to me. So I get really passionate about it. And sometimes it's good to kind of, talk seriously about it and the importance of it. So it's, thanks for letting me do that in this
Yeah,
here
I
cast,
forgot to
video cast or
mention.
podcast.
No problem. Thank you. Look, honestly, thank you because you're one of the first. You took a gamble. Hope I did justice by you, but I also forgot to tell people that you're a part-time comedian on Twitter Spaces, and so they can always tune in and hear you tell some jokes there.
Yeah.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'll see you around.
Yeah, they could, but now you're putting. All right, perfect. Thanks so much, man.
All right.